Hello, Laverne here. Believe it or not, it is, even though you cannot see me. And I thank you for joining me. May this video be a blessing to you, and may it honor and glorify God and His kingdom. In this video, I'm going to be discussing prophecy, and I'm going to be doing it by explaining some important events that have taken place over the past 6,000 years. Now, I want to make it clear up front that I don't believe the earth is only 6,000 years old. I believe that Scripture, God's holy word, is giving us a historical and prophetic account of the last 8,000 years of the earth's creation, its existence. And it began here approximately 4 billion years ago with the creation of the earth. And then approximately 6,000 years ago, we have God creating the first man in His image, whom He calls Adam. Now, this is not the video that I want to get into the discussion about the age of the earth and the universe. I have other videos on the topic. I am simply explaining this for the purpose of this video, that the earth is more than 6,000 years old. But if you want to debate this issue, I would ask that you go to one of the links I'll be providing to other videos I've made on this topic, where I explain that science is not in conflict with Christianity. So with that said, approximately 6,000 years ago, we have the birth of Adam. We have God creating man in His image. Then, approximately 2,000 years after that, we have the birth of the nation of Israel. We have Abraham, then his son Isaac, and through Isaac, Jacob, and from Jacob, his 12 sons, that we see the 12 tribes of Israel born. So this actually is 2 days after the birth of Adam. For Enoch tells us that 1,000 years is like 1 day to God. Enoch also tells us that in the seventh day there's going to be 1,000 years of peace, 1,000 years of rest, which is the seventh day, 1 day according to God. But prior to that, there's going to be a great time of testing. And we are living in that time period right now. And it's very important that we understand where along this timeline that we are living. Now, at approximately 1 AD, 2,000 years after the birth of the nation of Israel, we then have the birth of Christ. So at this point, we have 4,000 years from Adam to Christ, 4 days. Then we have the birth of Christ. And then 33 years later, approximately, 3.5 years of His ministry, we have the crucifixion of Christ and the birth of the church following His resurrection. Then, and this is what a lot of people don't understand, there is a period of 175 years. And during this time, the church is being protected against the lies of Satan, which brings us to approximately 208 AD. Now, to explain this, I'm going to be going to Revelation 12, and I'm reading from the New Living Translation Bible, beginning with verse 13. When the dragon realized that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. But she was given 2 wings like those of a great eagle, so she could fly to the place prepared for her in the wilderness. There she would be cared for and protected from the dragon for a time, times and a half a time. Then the dragon tried to drown the woman with a flood of water that flowed from his mouth. But the earth helped her by opening its mouth and swallowing the river that gushed out from the mouth of the dragon. And the dragon was very angry at the woman and declared war against the rest of her children who keep God's commandments and maintain their testimony for Jesus. Then the dragon took his stand on the shore beside the sea. So here we have it being described. First off, I'd like to mention that it's talking about those who keep God's commandments. I believe this is very important. This is written in the book of Revelation. This is a message from Jesus to John. And from John writing this, all of this out, all of his vision, it then goes to the church, to God's people. What we are shown here is that this dragon is trying to drown the woman with a flood of water that flows from his mouth. This is lies, the lies that come from Satan, for he is the great deceiver, the father of all lies. Now this times and a half, is important we understand what this is. This woman being talked about is the church. And what it's telling us is the church is protected for this period of time. Well, what is this period of time? Well, we need to understand that it's certainly not talking about a year plus 2 years plus a half a year. It would simply say, 3.5 years. But it's talking about a much longer period of time. And in the Hebrew culture, according to their calendar, there was a day, or rather a year, and it was called a Jubilee year. And this Jubilee year occurred, according to some, on the 49th year and others on the 50th year. A cycle of either 49 or 50 years, depending on what side you take, who you believe. I'm working with the more easily worked with number of 50, assuming that a Jubilee year marks the 50th year. This times and a half then represents 175 years. 50 plus 100 plus 25. And this is the time period that the church is protected from the lies of Satan. Now this doesn't mean that there's not going to be any persecution. That's not what it's telling us. It's not protecting individuals. That's not what's being talked about here. It's talking about protecting this woman who is the church. So the church itself is protected from the lies of Satan for 175 years. So this then brings us to approximately 208 AD, 175 years after the birth of the church, which took place approximately 33 AD. So we need to understand then that from that point, God takes his hands away, that the church is no longer protected in the same way that it was. And Satan is allowed to sift and to try the church, to test it. Just as Job was tested, the church is also being tested from that point on. And Satan is at war with the children of the woman, the children of God. All right, that's as far as I'm going to go in this video, just because there's too much new stuff to be talked about. I'd like to begin the new teaching of things you may not have heard. I'm going to save it for the next video. And I would have to say that of all the videos I've made, this next video is probably one of the most important. It will reveal an awful lot about who the prostitute and the beast is. I believe it will convince a lot of people who are thinking that the beast and the prostitute might be someone else. And I'm going to talk about where deception really began with the church. And it's important we understand this, for a lot of people seem to think that Satan did not enter into the church until recently. But when we understand that the deception began approximately 200 AD, 175 years after the birth of the church, then we see that there's been an awful lot of false teaching that a lot of people have accepted today simply because it began so long ago. And it's now ingrained in the church. It's become part of the church tradition. And it's been said that if you tell a big enough lie enough times, people will believe it. And that's what we see happening in the church today. There are great big lies, huge lies, but they've been told over and over and over so that people are now believing them. All right, as always, I do look forward to comments and messages. I really hope you'll join me in the next video. Till then, peace and blessings.